hearty good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to a session on what to expect during your IVF journey. We're glad to have Dr. Vijaygeetha Pathangae among us today to help us understand this topic. The doctor will help us understand the IVF journey a little better, especially if you're among those considering IVF, but don't know what exactly does this involve. So, doctor, you have the stage.
Thank you. Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Apollo CM Fertility, another topic. And this time we would be looking into a very important aspect among treatment seeking couple. It can be a fertility treatment or it can be an infertility treatment. But it's not something as common as you walk in, you have a meeting with the doctor, and then a set of prescription is written, and then you follow the instruction, a couple of scans, and your dream comes true, which is actually conceiving and conception, or as the value says, is like pregnancy positive. Does it sound as it sounds easy? Is it practically that easy? Well, the answer is again 50-50, which is like, it can be easy and it might not be. So in the entire today's journey is all about talking, or asking questions, or responding to something that a couple who has undergone or undergoing or planning to undergo, what all hurdles they had come across. And despite of all that, how as a team we have put forward to make their journey as comfortable as possible. So this is a session about in throwing light what could happen in your entire IVF journey on the whole, from walking in to as simple as a consultation and walking out being pregnant. So this is the journey all about, and we also encourage people to share about their experiences, if not to throw some light what they had come across, if it is not discussed during the session, but we will look into some of them. The underlying factor again would reiterate that whatever is the journey, the people who support would see that the couple who is being subjected to the treatment would um, take the journey, pass the journey, successfully complete the journey, and achieve the dream of conception. Is all about the entire crux. Let's get into the session. What is IVF? IVF or an ICSI is a short form or an abbreviation for in vitro fertilization, where the fertilization of a human egg with a sperm is done under laboratory conditions, either on a test tube or in a petri dish, ideally outside the physical body. So this fertilization is initially was termed as IVF. Considering now a lot of factors, almost all, or we do mostly ICSI, which is intracytoplasmic sperm injection, and then we start looking into the embryo development. 3 to 5 days. By 5 days, they come to a blastocyst culture, and most ideal conditions of the uterine cavity, and then an embryo transfer is being done. So this is in brief about a procedure. Those sounds in a line. What are the things that would or would be expected from a couple who is both a male and a female, and what are their contributions, or let's say eligibility for such a uh, procedure, which was explained in a single line? Well, from a women, we obviously need good quality eggs, and from a man, we expect good quality sperms. Happen so that on natural conditions with proper planning with monitoring, or sometimes there is medication, planning with monitoring. It is as simple as a timed intercourse, or sometimes it's also called planned intercourse, or it can be as simple as an intrauterine insemination, which is an IUI procedure. These all fall to the category even before a couple would walk into an IVF. Nobody walks directly into an IVF. So What is the prerequisite? The prerequisite is good quality eggs, which is simply that is expected from a female, and a good quality sperm, which is expected from a male. Now, to look into the good quality eggs, the biology of the human body among the females is that a lady would produce one ovum among one or two dominant follicles amongst the follicles that is being growing in the ovaries. So she would have been visiting the doctor who's an IVF specialist, and she would monitor the patient right from the onset of the periods, the second day. So once a lady gets a periods, it's her routine to go for regular follicular monitoring scan. So the journey begins as something like this, and let's say during her menstrual phase itself, there would be a scan done to not only check the shedding but also to see how many her ovarian reserves carry good androfollicle count, and then a scheduled scan would come, and among let's say just bed and hardly 4 5 years of married life, so the doctor would monitor to see how a natural cycle the body responds. So usually the consultant would say that let's walk in and come in for regular scans, and let's say when one dominant follicle is finally identified, grows, and then you given a hormonal injection for it to rupture, and then the doctor says that it's time to be together, and after which she would give the proper things to be done very precisely, and to meet on a very particular day, which will be around 14 days after her ovulation part, and then she would advise for a blood test or a UPT test, and then walk into the consultation. Well, this is what was expected, and then the lady would come every single time for the follicle to check whether the follicles are growing or not, because that's how it needs to be checked. From a man, her man or the husband side, what a doctor would see is probably would have requested for a seminangiogram to check the quality of the sperm, specifically the motility part, the morphology part, as well as the numbers or the count part. So three important parameters that a seminangiogram would give is this. Happen to see if there is some clinical correlate comes in. Doctor can advise for your DNA fragmentation index, which is a DFI. So this says about the quality of the sperm, and the index is usually supposed to be less than I think 35 or 40, and above 25, or above 40 to 50, above 75, it clearly indicates that the quality of the sperm available in the seminangiogram is not of a very good nature. So two simple parameters from the husband and a few parameters to be checked with the female. Usually the female is what is being called for repeated visits. And then let's say that the follicle grows, had ruptured, and they have done everything that is possible, that is expected out of a monitoring, and then the Peter HCG or your pregnancy test turns out to be negative. So a similar phase, a semen collection is collected, washed, or an IUI also would have been processed, and that also would have turned out to be negative. Now the lady is partially stressed, says that every time I give out an egg, and why is that the egg is not able to meet the sperm. Now this is where a lot of microscopic details are not available. So the doctor would advise, let's look into IVF. As the term is simple, but it is also horrifying for many people to even listen the term or the procedure or the treatment advice. Oops, I didn't want this to be faced today, but our specialist herself is quoting. So there's a lot of procrastination, thinking. Why don't you look for a secondary opinion? What are the other chances? Mostly the couple would sort into what are the other ways to get into a good healthy regime. Will it impact and imply on a better output? Even before a huge decision is done, there's a lot of mental comprehension that runs across, and there's a lot of time that has been taken to decide whether a couple would go or not. This is among couples whose report would say everything, madam, everything is normal, 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 normal from a female, and normal, normal, normal from a male. Well, when everything is normal, not happening itself indicates that something is not normal, something is not happening. And it's not a day or two. No, you've not got married last month and this month it's not clicking, and then something ticks in. Similarly, how it goes about would be that a lady would have been called. By this time she would have been repeatedly under the guidance of the same doctor. The doctor would have understood the body, the cycle, what is actually implying, what is not happening. Or as simple as that, probably we need to look into a microscopic details to figure out, is there really an issue that is obstructing? If not, sometimes to around 10 to 20 percentage of an unknown infertility factors, people do conceive after an IVF treatment. So where one falls, well, we do not know. As the image suggests, it is seen that the egg, if you look into the image, is very, very microscopic. And we are very happy to see that it is very much evident in the screen that the size, the appearance of the egg and then the appearance of the sperm, they're very minuscule and minuscule structures. So what happens with an IVF or ICSI is the lady who has been monitored would be now given hormones to support the growth, not but a one or two, but few to many follicles based on the body's capacity. So based on the ovarian capacity, the doctor would monitor the lady on regular intervals, and every day hormonal injections are being subjected to the ladies to make all the follicles that is available to grow. So the follicles, let's say on the right as well as on the left, the ovarian tissues respond, and a good amount of follicles grown. They are all well documented by size, and see that they all grow unanimously. And then one day there is a trigger injection given. Rather than waiting something naturally to rupture and come up, the procedure of IVF happens, where all the follicles are now being subjected through and retrieved out through a procedure which is called oocyte retrieval. So now the egg, the oocyte, which is also called the egg in a simpler terms, is removed from the women's ovaries. So thus removed egg undergoes a process of denudation, where good quality eggs are filtered out. And now this is the first time, along with the embryologist, sometimes the doctor also get to see the quality of the egg. Now this is the very first time that an egg is observed under a microscope. Till this egg being seen under the microscope, all the documentation or your past follicular development studies or your monitoring scan only reveals about the follicular growth. Within the follicle is a follicular fluid. Amongst the follicular fluid is the one egg that's growing, where usually it is not seen through the scan to look into or check into the quality of the egg. Now, the first question that gets addressed would be from the women's side: what was the quality of my egg? Was it a good quality? Is it a good batch of eggs? Is it something wrong? Is it immature? Or did it carry any, deformity? Or, there are many terms that would come to the picture. So there was a presence of this, or the were immature oocyte. And henceforth, this is the first time the lady's eggs are being monitored. Whereas in a male, it is not like that. We directly get a chance to see the normal commode of sperms from a natural ejaculate. The fertilized egg, which is then becoming an embryo, is thus returned back to the woman's womb to grow and develop. This is the actual process of an IVF or an ICSI. For the embryos to grow, we also have some limitations. Why can't we grow 10, 20 days of embryos? Why is that only 3 to 5 days? Because that is the amount of time that the cell, the embryo cell, can survive outside the uterus region. To grow further, the cells do require greater amount of nourishment, which a petri dish cannot provide. As simple. So once the blast stage happens, usually such embryos are transferred to the uterine cavity, where endometrium bed or the endometrium lining plays an important role along with some hormones. So there would be some hormonal that will be tested. Progesterone support medications are also given, and then the doctor would say, well, there is a clinical correlate and there are hormones also that is obliging. So everything seems to be very good and we can go ahead with an embryo transfer. As per the rules, we transfer, as per the request of the patient, 1 or 2 embryos, and thereby we wait for the next 15 days for a beta HCG, which is a blood test that is required from the patient side to be done. With this going on, let's see, there's a lot of picture that comes to the documentation part. So long only follicles were seen. Now in an IVF, the first time that we see through the follicle scan, it is a very common image that you see, it's like a black blob, and there's all a tiny growth that is being seen. And predominantly, since PCOD or PCOS is very common, the follicular study reveals a series of scans that studies the growth of the follicle and understanding the growth of the follicles in a cycle. Scan also provides, to rule out whether any cyst or an hemorrhagic cyst or a simple cyst, and also to check the number of androfollicle count that the ovaries can exhibit during a particular day of this cycle. Okay, so when all these, medical correlates are being seen, the lady has been monitored, subjected, okay, treatment is done, the result is a failure, then we get, since the doctor has seen the quality of the egg and the quality of the sperm, above all, one would understand there that sometimes a good quality egg and a good quality sperm would not lead to a good quality embryo. Now, these are all the factors where it comes to the picture okay, then something is hiding or something is definitely obstructing. So the person or the couple would be subjected to, let's say, any further test. Okay, what are some of the challenges that would come during the first IVF cycle? The lady would have been subjected with growth hormones or injections with constant monitoring. Anything can happen, and hyperstimulation or a hyperstimulation can come to a picture. So based on the clinical condition and the tolerance with the physical body, sometimes the consultant would continue with the stimulation cycle, or as easy or simple to say, the body is not able to cope up, or there are symptoms of ovarian hyperstimulation which is beyond the regime to have a clinical management. The doctor can sometimes just cancel the stimulation cycle. So your entire visit, let's say from the period second day to a few days of follicular scan, reveals that the medicine given sometimes is exhibiting too much of a stimulation. So we have to stop. Sometimes there can be stimulation is done, but there is no growth seen. So on a regular follicular study scan, despite taking heavy doses of hormones, we can also see a hyperstimulation. Common conditions or some parameters that can lead to a correlate is an AMH value. So among persons whose AMH is high, there are chances of getting into a hyperstimulation during her injection phases, and the chances of getting into a hyper stimulation among the ladies whose AMH is really very low from the ranges between 0 and 1. So among such cases, when the follicular study is not showing the promising development, correlating its development with the blood test report, then the stimulation can get cancelled. Now, this is the first hurdle that comes while a lady is being monitored during an IVF cycle. Next, second hurdle can also be that, let's say, injection phase is successfully done, an egg pickup is planned, but when the pickup has happened, unfortunately, we do not see any eggs. So rather than in a denudation process, there is just follicular fluid with no eggs. We do see such cases. So this is also another hurdle which would say due to an hormonal imbalance or something to look into as one of the hindrances among the stimulating phase of the couple that is being subjected to. So in such cases, there cannot be embryos done. There is no ICSI, so the treatment stops there itself. So these cases are subjected to deeper understanding of some blood test to check whether there are any other factors that is causing a cycle with a no response, or is it just is a simple hormonal fluctuation. Sometimes a couple just requires one more cycle of stimulation. So it is not like the person would come, get stimulated, and then eggs retrieved. So these are the challenges that comes. The follicles can grow, cannot grow too much or grow to nothing, or all grown, the oocytes or the eggs are not there. Or sometimes the eggs can be there, but there's something called bad batch of eggs where none of the eggs would have exhibited good quality to even go ahead to do ICSI for such eggs. So when you look at to the microscopical image of a good egg, you should have around 13 parameters that comprises of a good egg. So it starts from nucleus, your very good cell wall, the cell volume, everything is added to the zona pellucida. These are all the structural functions, the structures that's been seen under the microscope, which gets to decide that, hey, this is a very good egg. If something is not there, missing, or doesn't appear to be all good, or sometimes there's just an air vacuole and there are degenerating cells, and then that time the embryologist will say this egg is not fit for the ICSI to be done, which is to put a sperm inside the egg might not happen. Third important factor is the eggs might be good, and let's say a good sperm is also taken out, and then the ICSI is done. So as the image represents, inside the egg, if you look at the image, inside the egg, the sperm is being lodged. Now, every 24 hours, the embryologist would look into the growing phases of the embryo. So the two nucleus would become into two embryo cells in the first 24 hours. And then the next 24 hours, they double. So there's something called doubling or more happens to look into the growth of the embryo cells. Anything can happen in this phase. Sometimes the embryos would continue to grow. Sometimes the embryos might perish. Sometimes the embryos might show in a longer run, I don't think so, they would survive, leading to failure of a growth of an embryo. So all this actually, how we are able to understand is because we've seen these embryos growing under the microscopical condition, which is expected to grow within the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube is too tiny and we cannot see how the embryo grows within that tubal structure. So after the development of powerful microscopes, we are able to see how the embryo grows under an embryoscope. Now, these are all the challenges that would come when a couple is planning for an IVF and happens to go through, selected for IVF, hormones are normal, injections are given. Luckily, injection phase is also gone. Now, egg pickup has happened. So out of, let's say, some 20 follicles, there were 18 oocytes retrieved. Out of 18 oocytes, there were 16 oocytes that were really very good. Out of 16 oocytes, we retrieved some 14 embryos, out of which there were like 10 grade A, a couple of grade B, grade C's, grade D's, and so on. The embryologist would discard any embryo which is not alive. Otherwise, all embryos which are alive and growing is fit to be frozen. So these are all the challenges that would come during your monitoring phase. You're still not pregnant, so the cell is taken out until this phase. These are all the hindrances that comes, and every hindrance you go back again to the starting point of follicular scan and medications or injections. So this is all that happens among the scanning period. Next, among the next hurdle that would come is, let's say the embryos have grown. So if you see that there are a good batch of embryo bank is being done, and the next thing is to see how the embryo transfer needs to happen. If your embryo transfer needs to happen, everybody is aware that a good endometrium bed is very important. Well, the doctor would check through a transvaginal scan to see whether an endometrium is really well lined, well made, and along with that, the supporting hormones is also there. But previously, when the implantation was done, it led to a failure. So, what are some of the hurdles that can avoid a couple undergoing an embryo transfer? Can be presence of a polyp or cyst, or there is a any other hidden obstructions in the uterus. So, a doctor would advise a diagnostic hysteroscopy or a laparoscopy or a diagnostic hysterolaparoscopy to view the uterus, the uterine cavity inside as well as outside. Laparoscopic procedure evaluates the external surroundings of the uterus or the reproductive system, which includes the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, and the uterus on the whole. And a hysteroscopy would validate where a scope with a camera and light is sent into the uterine cavity to check the endometrium, the lining, is there any defect, how is the uterus position, it's a completely grown uterus, or is there a unicornuate or bicornuate, or is there a presence of septum, are there presence of fibroids, are there something as polyps or cysts present within the cavity. You need to rule out all this to check whether the uterus is really very healthy, to transfer or lodge two embryos and see whether the environment is good enough for the embryos to attach itself and grow. So the hysteroscopy or a laparoscopy or a hysterolaparoscopy in diagnostics is considered among cases where there is a history of an implantation failure. So the hysteroscopic procedure rules out because there are images that sent where the doctor is able to see if there are presence of uterine fibroids, or do you need to do a tissue test. There's always there are two important factors which affect sometimes the implantation would be an endometrium as well as a tuberculosis of the endometrial tissue. So sometimes a doctor can take up a tissue sample and send it to a lab for a culture to check whether there is an endometrial tuberculosis presence or not. So sometimes a biopsy can be done. If there is a presence of a septum that is obstructing the implantation of an embryo, hence was a reason why the past implantations never happened or happened and was a failure, there can be septum corrections that can happen through a hysteroscopy. Or suddenly there is an identification of a polyp or some cyst present that is obstructing towards the implantation. All this can be not only diagnosed, not only checked, but also can be corrected with either a diagnostic hysteroscopy or a complete hysteroscopy. Two important interventional procedures would come to a picture among couples whose, let's say, one IVF has failed, because we do not know as of now. Initially, follicular growth was monitored. Follicle now grew very well. Then eggs were taken out. Now the quality of eggs were all appearing now to be good. Now embryos were done. Let's say 2 to 3 embryos died or got disintegrated or degenerated during the growth phase, and we have freeze around like 80% of the embryos. One, two, there were three hurdles. Now implantation, when there is an implantation process comes, the implantation is not happening, for which we need to rule out any physiological as well as any other obstructions or hindrances are seen, both inter as well as intra. So both the ways, the uterine or the reproductive organ outside and within needs to be monitored for a healthy pregnancy to be continued. And these tests also would throw light on why sometimes in the past the pregnancy did not or was a failure. Now let's say all this is being done, and after this is all being done, we get back to the incidents where plan for an embryo transfer, monitoring. Again, we go back to the point one, follicular study, to check not the follicles this time but your endometrium thickness. And then once your endometrium thickness arrives at a certain stage, and the doctor will put you on a good hormone support, and then let's say an embryo or two is being transferred. Beyond this, something also comes up. Again, implantation doesn't happen. Now, this is the time to look into much deeper. There can be genetic tests that can be done in an embryo to rule out is there any genetic anomaly that can be identified on a 5-day grown embryo to see whether there are causes for implantation failure. And to rule out all these medical factors, as lot of visits, and for every visit, it's going to be again from the step one, a follicular study. So what happens psychologically to a couple who is being subjected to go round and round the same phase again and again? Why is that? And everything cannot be checked in the very first time itself. Sometimes everything need not be checked, because by the time you rule out your let's say through blood test, look into the genetic factor, the cost of diagnosis itself is too high. So by the time you're investing on the diagnosis, you can at least finish a one cycle of an IVF treatment. And always the body needs the exposure to check in what actually happens until your cells, beyond which there is the decision that can be taken. So to avoid unnecessary huge diagnosis, testings can be given subjectively and not particularly every failure that adds up. Usually, if we see among such couples, the quality of life goes for a great challenge. So, what are some of the things that comes as a hindrance among such couples where though we see a 50-50 chances of conception, let's address the 50 percentage of the non-conceiving people. There's always a window around 20 percentage of unexplained infertility. All the hormonal factors are right, all the tests are right, the diagnosis is correct, there's absolutely no problem with the uterine cavity. Sometimes there cannot be a problem even in the genetic test of the embryos. It's only that sometimes it doesn't get implanted. So among such couples, we need to sometimes look deeper. That can be as simple as the deeper blood test which looks into the endocrinological part of the implantation, or are there any other hormones that is affecting, and any further test that requires that needs to be done. Is there any issues with the blood? All this will come to the picture, which is all on a later run. So by the time if you see, it is not a it's not it doesn't become a simple journey. It just becomes a journey that gets becomes a part of your life until you achieve your dream comes true. So what are the first thing that any person would look into is a major life crisis. Once a couple is identified with fertility issue itself, it was like, oh my god, now I have to make time for regular plans and visits for monitoring. What does one mean by a fertility issue? There cannot be venues. It's like a simple hindrance where there is no major obstruction or problems with the reproduction. It's only that simple hormonal imbalances, or just requires a monitoring for conception, like a follicular growth study, or your endometrium thickness preparation for their implantation. Something like that of a monitoring is required. All comes as fertility issues where the fertility factors are very good among the couple. It's just they need some monitoring, guidance, and pushing. They come into infertility cadre once a repeated failure comes, or there are history of miscarriages, or a couple of IVF treatments are failed, and then we try to probe into detail. Most of the time when you probe by one or two stimulation, a doctor would understand, okay, the body is not responding properly to follicular phase, or the body responded nice. We did have a good batch of embryos, but none of the embryos were of a good quality. Can be an hurdle. Or number of embryos or everything was fine, but the implantation is just not happening, which a major chunk of population falls to this cadre. And sometimes it is also called unknown infertility. It's just that you just need to undergo another IVF cycle, get yourself stimulated, and try for few more embryo transfers. We've seen on a rarer conditions couples who's undergone a couple of IVF cycles, and there is no issue. It's only that embryo transfers, and then finally the lady has achieved her conception after I think 2 or three IVF cycles with no further reasons. So sometimes it's just that it requires certain things. We do not know what is happening within the body microscopically. Sometimes it just takes time. So this becomes, psychologically a major, life crisis. The treatment's experience or the treatment itself becomes from so simple to such an elaborate, extensive, and emotionally challenging that sometimes a simple diagnostic method can cause a deeper impact, irritation, trauma, financial burden, and above all, the pain and the discomfort that the women would undergo. All of this would come to the picture among couple who are very anxious to conceive. We all understand that biologically two different bodies are the reproductives are positioned in two different patterns. One is more internal and one is more external. It is always good to see but that both the male and the female undergo equal fertility parameter checking. This encouragement is right now, at least we would see around this part of the year, to see that a lot of couples would come. There is an increase among walk-ins or people who come to have their fertility check, like something like a marriage planning, or among married couple, whether to take a break or not, or among family planning couple. Probably I would like to understand, or we would like to understand our fertility factors, so that it is convenient for us to do the right family planning, because either the man or the women or both would have had other opportunities or task which is very important that needs to be finished, to decide whether their pregnancy can be postponed, can it be delayed, or is it something that is very important that you need to start now and it has its own rhythmic cycle to cope up. So since it's non-conclusive, let the diagnostic and the maintenance or um, enhancing fertility treatments begin, and then gradually when they are achieving their relevant tasks in their life, the pregnancy things are also coming up to a picture, and then planning for the pregnancy. The most important factor, and a lot of the research work studies which says, is that the quality of life plays a very important role, and then it is that there is an increase in the health problems among sometimes male or as a female who are planning with an IVF. There can be an increase like body weight issues, or there can be eating disorders or sleeping disorders, and the quality of life when it comes to the picture is actually a multidimensional factors that needs to be seen. To a person, morning waking up having a glass of milk and one idli is very common, but when a person is being subjected to a treatment or monitoring or enhancement, sometimes your little nourishment is not sufficient. You need to look deeper to understand what is the quality of life, or whether the quality of life under the fertility factors are supporting enough. So your, let's say I'm planning to shed weight, or I'm under an intermittent fasting, sometimes might not work. So you need to be in constant touch with your treating doctor as well as your health counselors to check, if I do something, will it hamper my long term process cycle of, let's say, a fertility or an infertility treatment. So quality of life plays a very important role. Some of the most important factors that is seen are among working cadres. The work goes for a great disturbance. A person might not be able to focus much in the office work because he or she is constantly being looked and are expected in the hospital for monitoring or for treating purposes. So the mental health also gets affected because it's the health that goes for a toss. Sometimes 100% focus in the work which is being expected through the work might not be given. So the lot of research does suggest that sometimes there is great stress that is also involved. Stress plays a very important role in not only affecting the overall health but also the reproductive health in both male as well as in female. their anxiety. Sometimes the couple would set up into a depression, or if, let's say, a personality is not so comfortable in accepting that one is having a health issue, or the personality that always throws the ball on others, is like, everything is happening because of you. So there are a lot of interpersonal and intrapersonal issues that comes up. More worse to be if they are a part of a big joint family. So the treatment experiences, the extensive elaborate time that is spent under the diagnosis, and the emotional challenging situations which needs to be handled, not only the workspace, sometimes the society space or the social space, and your personal home space, where you are constantly being monitored, and also an update needs to be given. And they throw their own ideas to say, you do as I say, and then when that is not what actually your body is also tend to responding, the women or the men or as a couple, they are being subjected to various stress. Sometimes a person's ethnic background would also play an important role. Let's say there is a fertility treatment that the doctor has been subjected and it is going on. Suddenly there is this festival week or a festival month, or something that comes to the picture, where your entire lifestyle, behavior, eating pattern is going to go for a change. One needs to understand that you whether such kind of changes can be incorporated or not. If not, they sometimes leads to unfruitful reaction or an incident among treatment undergoing couples. So your finance, so your family challenges, your social challenges, your ethnic challenges, your work challenges, and your own health that gets responding towards the treatment, all are subjected to change. On an average, give it a month or a time, a normal couple who's very simple came, underwent an IVF treatment, and got conceived. But in a longer run, in another situation where the conception is not happening, you need another stimulation. So let's look into it. Or there are identified infertility factors, so you definitely need a treatment. Or do you just need an IVF treatment to overcome all those limitations, are all major decisions that needs to be done to monitor your pregnancy issues, or something to go ahead with. So when so much of inconvenience, that is what I have seen here, or been a part in a couple's journey, this has been documented. Why don't I hear, is there any other issues that has been causing a doubt or has obstructed in any further IVF taken treatment? Would be good to share, and let's throw some light so that it will make treatment seeking couple to be highly vigilant of. So, any questions from the audience who's listening? Okay, so with these are the common let's say personal life adjustments to work life adjustments or health. There's a lot of time that's required. Reiterating back, and in IVF treatment, a lot of time is very important. Sometimes not only your timely injections or timely monitoring of your follicles plays an important role. Sometimes a timely decision also is equally important, like a diagnostic hysteroscopy. We will procrastinate and probably look later, can be a very expensive decision. So time is very important factor. Two, when it comes with your fertility health, not your overall health, sometimes your simple lifestyle or your routine lifestyle might not be cooperating. So always look into to know whether your quality of life pertaining to this particular aspect of life and plan, is it well coinciding or not. So your nutritional intake, which is the very first implication where your body relies as an input, needs to be well taken care. Three, activities. What activities one is involved to make life a better way to live. If you're a working person, let's say 12 hours of a day is easily taken away by your focus, which distracts from your mind which says why things are not happening, what are the factors that needs to be seen, is there something that is being hidden. So all these anxiety that steps up out of a failure can be easily curbed by distracting or deviating the mind and focusing into something else. If not, quality hobbies does play an important role, like an art or any artwork, or let's say stitching or knitting, that just takes away your in reality time. They completely get engrossed into some other world, and then that peace of mind helps you to calm down, and probably a better answer you would have arrived at. So hobbies plays an important role. Let's say you just scribble, you have a habit of scribbling as you watch, and then something is running in your head. When you look at your own scribble or your artwork, that speaks a lot. Is there a conscious stress? Is there a subconscious stress? Why certain things are appearing very beautiful now, and this is really looking very shabby? Is there any something that's been so cluttered in the subconscious mind that is actually shabby? How open are you to take up your own challenges? All this can be understood by oneself with their own hobbies that they are trying to incorporate. But personality plays an important role. So as a psychologist, when I do a lot of personality check, what hobby that one personality would prefer is likely not the same pill to another personality. It's not all crossings that work on everybody. So psychological factors, personalities comes to a picture. So incorporate a lot of hobbies that will keep you distracted as well as keep you in a healthy state of mind. Hmm, what is that is very important? Your nutrition, your time, your activities. Be active. So that can be sometimes as simple as one IVF cycle, or that can be as simple as two stimulation or a three stimulation. So every time a body undergoes a stimulation or a transfer, there's a lot of medication that's given to support. So that medication involves a lot of, it can be as simple as a gastric problem to as complicated as a weight gain. So see that whenever there is a window that you're taking as a break, doctor, I will take a month's break and come back for another embryo transfer. So you have 1 month in your hand. So that 1 month is your key in your hand to achieve what you want to do. Probably you would have gained weight because of the treatment. So you can shed. So 1 month you can dedicate. Eat quality food, eat protein rich food. So you're focusing more on your fertility aspect of life that you would like to achieve. So these are some of the main highlights that when procrastinated or overseen has caused major changes in an IVF procedure's outcome. So look into it and see that you apply relevant support, so that whatever you are trying to do, it actually enhances your treatment cycle or your health, specifically your fertility health, and see that your dreams come true. So since there are no further questions, thank you very much for listening. So if you have any further doubts on how to plan, don't know what to do, what are the productive lifestyle that can be incorporated among pregnancy planning couple. I'm pregnant, but my doctor says it's a bit critical. What to do next? You can always walk into Apollo CM Fertility. We have our experienced consultants, our doctors, and our team members, including a psychologist, who would help you to make your journey much simpler and easier. Thank you for listening.